Hi, folks. Welcome back to Let's Listen, where our youth, with a little help, will try to destigmatize mental illness. Today, on our program, we have Jolene Osztian, we have Em, we have Noah, and they're going to be chatting about substance use and mental health. Let's see what these youth have to say.
Welcome back to another podcast with Huddle South Central. My name is Counselor Jolene, and today I'm joined by
Emily, or Em,
and Noah.
And let's get started. Noah, do you want to introduce our topic for the day?
Today we're going to be talking about substance abuse and mental health.
Awesome. Thank you for introducing that, Noah. What do you guys want to talk about right off the bat? Anything you want to share? Any place you want to start?
So I know for me that talking about medication and other substances, I use certain medication for anxiety and depression, and that kind of keeps me balanced on a day-to-day, but it doesn't help me in the moment.
I think I can add on to that too. I used to take antidepressants, but then I kind of went off them for a while. But like in the moment, I guess it helped. But like for like long term, not really. But like in the moment, not so much. So
I'm glad you guys kind of bring that up because we know that there are a lot of different kinds of substances, right? There are prescription substances, there are non-prescription substances, some that have benefits and cons at the same time. You guys both mentioned you had maybe different experiences using the anxiety and depression medication.
Yeah, so I actually had to switch my meds from fluoxetine to sertraline. Just two different SSRIs they do the same thing approximately, but I found the fluoxetine did not work for me. It just didn't do what I needed to do, and after I switched, I felt significantly better. I don't know, what about you?
I took fluoxetine for a while. It didn't really help either. Like it kind of just like numbed me to the point where like I didn't feel anything. Like I wouldn't even feel like joy or anything. Like I just felt like nothing. So like I don't know if that's a bad thing or like a good thing, but like personally for me it just sucked because I literally couldn't cry for like a whole month, or I just couldn't feel like any emotions. So.
Well, and I know for me that's exactly why I started smoking weed. Was that I didn't feel numb. I actually felt good. Like all of the stuff that was making me anxious and sad went away, and I actually just got to enjoy my life. So, of course, it was enticing to keep using, even though, it's not legal at my age.
So, there's a lot of different substances that are out there. And you guys mentioned, you were on the prescription medication. With prescription medications, we know that sometimes it's a little bit of a balancing act, right? Where we have to talk to our provider and figure out what dosage or which specific one is going to work best for us. And you mentioned that you kind of chose to use maybe some other substances as well. Did you want to share a little bit more about that experience?
Sure. It's been interesting for me. I have hyper-attentive hearing when it comes to my anxiety, and having used marijuana, it was intriguing to me because it made everything quieter. I guess what would be considered quote-unquote normal for most people. It was a lot easier to focus on what I wanted to do and what I needed when I wasn't so hyper attentive to what was going on around me.
I would say the same thing. Like, after I stopped taking my antidepressants, I started, like, using marijuana, or I also started vaping a lot, too. And I feel like weed kind of, like, it almost helps it at the same time, but also I feel like it kind of makes it worse for me, because, like, when I'm on that high, like, I feel, like, nice, but I also just, like, all those thoughts kind of, like, are there all at once, and it makes it hard to, like, focus on one thing. So that's why it's kind of hard for me to want to smoke sometimes, but also I just do it all the time now, so I don't know.
I think it's important to remember that with a substance like marijuana, everybody has very different experiences, and it is in a drug class of its own because it can create those very, very different effects in different people.
Well, and I think it's interesting because, like, for me, I had the opposite effect where I wasn't focused on my thoughts or focused on what other people thought about me. I was solely just, what do I want to do, right? It's interesting to me that just criminalize more drugs, because I find I like on the grand scheme of things, when it comes to a lot of some substance issues, I think one of the biggest safety and aids for both physical and mental health would be the ability to access substances in a safe way, because regardless of whether we want them to or not, people are using them to cope, and so why not make coping safer?
Absolutely. There's a lot of different reasons that we know people use substances. When it comes to that sort of harm reduction lens, with a substance like marijuana, we know that that is been legalized for those over the age of 19. What kind of harm reduction approach are you guys using with the substances that you choose to take?
So, like, I mean, I have my prescription meds that I take, which obviously come from the pharmacy, and then all of the marijuana that I choose to use comes from the stores that are now available to receive that, which is, you know, my point exactly when it comes to creating safe, accessible substances in all categories, in that I know that, like, there are risks to the substance, but not to anything being mixed in with it, because it comes from a safe place.
And there are a lot of great resources out there for that. In Winnipeg, we don't have a, dedicated site for safe consumption, but we do have the MOPS van, the mobile outreach. Do you guys know of any other resources that you've reached out to, or that you know of, that have kind of helped you maybe make some safer choices when you're using substances?
So I think this is a great place to talk about the huddle and whatnot, and obviously you don't go to the huddle to use, but you can go and receive safe equipment and naloxone and whatnot to, it's like a first aid kit. We have a way to but minimize the damage done when using substances of any kind.
And the Huddle is such a great space for that, and that goes for all the Huddles have that availability. There are also a lot of other organizations and agencies in the city that have that safer use supplies available. Do you think that there is any stigma surrounding substance use, and how have you navigated that?
Tons of stigma. I mean, I have never come across it, but I think that's because marijuana has slowly become less and less stigmatized due to the fact that it was legalized. But, you know, I think one of the greatest stigmas of all is, you know, oh, that person is homeless because all they do is drugs. Or, you know, that person just, we judge people for appearance and for the choices they make that we would not make ourselves. But, I mean, as we've been discussing this whole time, is like, how do those substances actually help us cope with things? And because they do for some people, I don't think it's necessarily fair to judge someone for choosing to use said substance. Another big thing about stigmas is the peer pressure towards it. You know, I had family members smoking it for a ton of time, friends even. I have siblings who smoked it and they're like, here, have some. And it's, for the longest time I was, no, I don't want any. And eventually you just kind of cave. It's like, sure, let's see what it's all about. And I mean, for me, it helped, but that's also a rabbit hole that you go down where, you know, if you have an addictive personality, that's a quick way to develop an addiction. And so it's such a complicated area of mental health and substance use to navigate because of the stigmas and the effects it has on our body at the same time.
I think I can relate to the same thing. Like, I think most of it for me was peer pressure at the beginning. Like, a lot of my friends and, like, mostly all my family members smoke or drink or, like, have, like, do some sort of substance abuse. I think the most common one for me is either marijuana or nicotine. And, like, at first, for me, it was kind of like, I don't want to do that kinds of stuff because I don't want to damage my body. But also, I think after a while, I just got so, like, used to it that I just started doing it. And then slowly it started turning into, like, an addiction that, like, helped me cope with things that I couldn't cope with myself. So I think it also helped me a ton, but I also think I regret starting it so young because I wish I wouldn't have, so I wouldn't be, like, so deep into something that, like, I didn't really want for, like, the longest time. So
You guys both mentioned that there was this aspect of peer pressure that came up in regards to substance use. Could you tell me a little bit more about what that looks like and where it's coming from?
So I think one of the big things especially is it's really not that hard to get your hands on a substance, even with all the laws and restrictions, you know, and I'm not even talking about marijuana alone, I'm talking about any substance. Really not that hard. And so when you're hanging out with friends and or maybe not every person, but most people are doing it, teenagers are ruthless. You either follow their lead and be in the in crowd, or you are very clearly on the out. And so there's this, you know, not using the substances feeds into your mental health, which allows you to eventually cave to using the substances, which make your mental health feel better sometimes worse, but in my experience better. And then you're using substances now, so now you're on the in again. But then the in has its own problems. Don't get me wrong, I'm well aware that substances don't fix the problems. It's a way to run away from them for me. But I think it's less about permanently running away and more so, you know, it's late at night, I'd like a little bit of time away from my thoughts, and I'm not able to do that by myself. So that's when you smoke a joint and then you relax a little bit. Yeah, it was so many kids doing it.
I think for me too, I think it was more so my friends that kind of got me into it than less like my family, because obviously my family is responsible and they're like, no, you can't do this, you're still too young. But like most of my friends are 18, so it's not that hard for them to be able to get it. And I think I wanted to just feel like I was a part of something, so maybe if doing it with them would make it easier to hang out with them. Because before, before I started getting like really into it, it was mostly just them doing it, and then they'd be like, oh, like, don't be boring, blah blah blah, like, just do it with us. And then I'd be like, no, I don't want to. But then that like deep thought in the back of my head, like, maybe I am boring, like maybe I need to do this to fit in with them. So then I just started doing it with them, and I mean, it kind of felt nice because I felt like I was a part of something, but also like I wish I didn't be peer pressured into something that's so like impacting my life now.
So there's this general theme of wanting to fit in with our friends and what is it that they're doing, as well as this theme of like, you know, needing something to kind of help cope with the other mental health challenges that are going on in your life at the moment.
I mean, so sorry, my brain fried. Did you ask a question? No? Okay, sorry. So on the other side of stigma, you have the stigmas around using mental health prescriptions and mental health in general. Sometimes it's even more so stigmatized. I have friends who just now have finally been able to get themselves some meds for depression, anxiety, or anything like that. And they're hiding them from their family because it's been drilled into them that it's not okay. And for those who don't have the ability to go around their family and get it, they're using, right? You know, I'm lucky enough to have the ability to take prescription medication, and I still choose to smoke occasionally, but I have friends who don't have that opportunity and turn to vaping and smoking and marijuana more often because of it.
I think I'm one of those people who don't have the ability to be able to like freely take like medication with my family, because my parents kind of disown me when it comes to mental health, because they always tell me that it's not real or it's not bad enough, or that like I don't need medication to make myself feel better. But I think too, for those couple of months that I was taking it, like, they noticed such a big difference in me, but they didn't really want to acknowledge that. So then my parents just stopped giving it to me. So then that's like when I really turned to like substance abuse. I mean, I was doing it before, but like after that I kind of started using it a lot more, and it started getting like pretty bad for me. So I don't know, I'm still trying to find a way to cope with it, but like it's still pretty hard to deal with every day. So
Noah, you mentioned for you that there was this aspect of using substances to cope, and maybe now you are kind of, wishing that you hadn't turned towards those substances or maybe explored other options. Could you share any other strategies or coping mechanisms that have kind of helped you with your mental health or with the substance use?
I don't know. I mean, for now, it's mostly just been using those things, but I also think talking to people kind of helps me a bit more. Or just I don't know. I don't think anything really helps me. I think it's just distractions that are kind of taking over for the moment. But then when I don't have those distractions, it's I have a craving for wanting to do those things. So, I don't know. It's kind of like a rabbit hole. It's like a big cycle. Where I feel guilty, but then I just want it so bad, so then I do it. And then I feel the guilt afterwards. And it's what is going on? I don't know. I'm just stuck in this big cycle that I'm trying to get out of, so yeah.
Absolutely. I think that there is maybe sometimes this kind of challenge that we have with ourselves when we have found something that's kind of helping, but it's maybe not helping the way that we'd like it to, or maybe it's not the healthiest or safest of coping mechanisms. And so that kind of brings in other aspects of our mental health, experiencing maybe that guilt on a regular basis. And maybe right now we're kind of at a point where we're still exploring some coping options.
Well, and you mentioned earlier, Noah, that your parents aren't really forward-thinking when it comes to mental health. And I think that's another great place is, in my experience, my parents are in the middle ground, but trying to, I go to therapy and then I get told, whatever my day was like, right? And we discuss it, and then I go home and my parents will ask me, how was therapy, if you're comfortable to share. And I'm like, yeah, we talked about this and trauma from my childhood. And there's almost this level of shame in it for me, for the looks that you get. It's well, did I do something? My parents will look at me like they did something. It's well, I don't want to hurt their feelings, but when you have trauma that stems from your childhood home life, that you can't change where it comes from, right? And so there's this stigma that's put on where, they're helping you cope, they're helping you get the resources you need, but it's almost like they're frustrated that you blame them, or not necessarily blame them, but that you even dare to say that it would be partially their fault. And that itself is another driving factor to turn to other substances. It's clearly my coping mechanisms are not okay for them, so I guess I'll go smoke weed with my friends instead.
Absolutely. I think sometimes it can be really hard when we are interacting with other people, such as our parents, and having to acknowledge that maybe as a parent we hadn't made the best choice or behavior previously, and kind of confronting that. I think that generally goes for a lot of people. It can be really difficult to sort of confront some of our past behavior. It can be maybe another challenge that comes up, or even just another area of stigma or shame from not having that support from our family.
I think I can relate to what Em said about the whole family thing. I think mostly for me, they're not really, it's not like they're shamed about it. It's more so they're in denial about it. Like, they feel almost as if, like, I was too, I don't know. Like, whenever, most of my therapy kind of stems from my childhood, and, like, most of my traumas kind of stem from that. And, like, even from, like, a couple of years ago, I think. And whenever I talk about it with them, it's almost as if, like, I'm the one being the bad person because I'm going to therapy because of them. And I think they're kind of mad, but not so much, like, sad about it. They're like, oh, like, what did I do? It's more so, like, what are you doing? Like, I didn't do anything to you. Like, sort of like that. And I think it kind of eats me up a little bit because it makes me feel like I'm the bad person for wanting to talk about how they treated me when I was younger, and even as I got older. So I think that's when I really kind of turned to substance abuse, because, like, it kind of made me forget about it in the moment, but then after a while it just kind of gets to me a bit. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, gaslighting from parents, at least on my side of things, was really, really harsh, and just furthered my desire to not talk to them. You know, why I'm trying to get positive kinds of help and it's not, and you're telling me that I'm the bad guy for doing so. Well, if that's the case, then I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to stop using positive coping mechanisms, and I'll turn to, you know, what I feel works when I don't have the assistance that I need, right? So it's just, it's very frustrating because the denial of what they did in my past would be, it just kind of drives home and furthers that trauma, right? It's very frustrating, especially when these are the people that are supposed to love you the most in the world.
Yeah, I definitely feel that a lot. Trying to remember. Okay, you keep talking.
Do you have another question?
Yeah, so one of the things I think that's been kind of coming up throughout this conversation is that there are maybe challenging aspects on all sides, right? We have the challenges that maybe we are personally dealing with in regards to our mental health. There is the challenges with our friends and the activities or behaviors that they're engaging with that they might put pressure on us to engage in. And also the challenge with our support systems or with our family and maybe how they are helping or not helping in regards to our mental health and our experiences and perspectives on substance use. What is something that you guys wish people knew or understood more about the challenges that youth face regarding mental health and substance use?
I think my biggest issue is a lot of people, at least that I know, who are in older generations, will see a younger person in the workforce using accommodations for mental health issues, or taking stress leave days, and will shake their head and wag their finger and you know, claim that they don't actually need it, that they're just using this new age thinking to get out of work, or that they're lazy, or that they're whatever, right? There's such a stigma around things that we are implementing nowadays to improve mental health, and it's like, at least for me, it's anxiety inducing to have to, go to someone and say, hey, I need this accommodation, or hey, I need a day off because my anxiety is too high. And then that just gets furthered by someone calling me out and saying, you don't have anxiety, or you're not stressed, you just can't keep up with it like the rest of us. It makes me not want to speak up again, which defeats the purpose of recognizing that we do have mental health problems in our world and that we should prep accommodations for them, right? It's unfortunate that in the century, or centuries before us, that people were not treated equally or given equitable accommodations for when they need them, because people didn't recognize the need for those things. But that shouldn't mean that we don't get them, even though we do. We recognize them now so that we can change for the better in the future. We can't change the past. We can just move forward. And that's really hard to do when people keep squandering what we're trying to implement.
For me, I think it's mostly like the older generation thing. Like, I don't know. It just kind of makes me upset when people, like, when I tell like older people or whatever the case may be that like I do suffer with mental health, and they're just like what is that? Like, there's no such thing as mental health, or whatever the case may be. And it kind of like makes me frustrated, because like it's not like I can tell them exactly how I feel every day. So like it's not like I'll be able to get them to understand anyways. But like I feel like them like living for so long, I feel like they should like be able to adapt to like new things that are happening every day. And like this is definitely one of them. And I think for me too, like I did get like a lot of, like when I worked in the summertime, like my mental health was really bad then. And like I genuinely like almost quit my job because of how bad it got. And like I didn't show up to work some days. Like I didn't even like tell my boss where I was. I just didn't show up because I was kind of like sabotaging my job a little bit, because I just felt so like sad. And I don't know, they didn't really understand. They were just like, oh, you're just like lazy, like you don't want to do anything. But it's like, no, I just genuinely can't get out of bed today. So.
And I think this plays into a wider theme where older generations in general don't want to listen to us. You know, we see it in a lot of things. A great example would be the climate strikes, and teenagers walking out of school in protest. You know, our generation is more open to the idea of using substances or enjoying substances, or even not judging people for wanting to use them. But the older generations who remain and are still a majority in our society are, you know, forcing older beliefs and the idea that that's not okay, and that's, you know, that's not what we want for the world. And it's difficult because, well, it's not your turn to decide what the world wants or needs. You know, that's the point of us, the new generation growing up, is now it's our turn. You know, what do we want to see added to society? What do we want to see changed about society? And in, 20 years, it'll be the next generation's turn. I can't wait to see my sister grow up and what she chooses to believe in and what she wants to see happen. You know, I'm sure there's things that we don't recognize right now that in 20 years they'll say, yeah, this is a major problem and we need accommodations for it. And I hope and pray that I'm open-minded enough and that the rest of my generation is open-minded enough to say, okay, that makes sense. Sure, we'll try it. Instead of being, well, I didn't have that when I was your age, that's a dumb accommodation. We don't need that. You're just lazy. Because what does it matter? Why is it so bad to add things that benefit us? What is wrong with having stress leave? There's nothing wrong, and there's nothing preventing an older person taking it either. But they won't take it because of a mindset that they were born or that they were raised with years ago. That's, I think, the biggest problem when it comes to mental health and substances, right? We have, as you mentioned earlier, the kind of catch-22 of, there's stigma around mental health and there's stigma around substance use, and they go hand in hand because the main stigma is this refusal to change in our world.
Definitely, I think that we do see, sometimes this really fixed attitudes and beliefs about certain things in the world, especially in regards to something like mental health, accommodations, substance use. I think it's also really interesting to see that statistically we're actually seeing maybe less substance use of certain substances such as alcohol amongst today's younger generations than we did in the past. How do you guys think that, your schools, communities, or employers could better support youth in terms of mental health and substance use?
I know one of the things that me and a lot of my classmates were focused on was guidance counselors and how busy they were. I went to high school and, right off in grade 8, they were constantly busy. You couldn't get in to see one for 2 weeks if you set up an appointment. And even then, it's like, well, okay, but I'm not having a crisis in 2 weeks. I'm having a crisis now. And I would like to talk to someone, and there's just no one available. And then during COVID, they actually shut the doors to the counselor's office. So you could only make an appointment. There was no way of walking in to talk for a little while. And then they didn't open it back up after COVID kind of settled down. They left it locked so that safe space was taken away from us. There's such a focus on schooling, but in general, our age of schoolees have been, they've truly been pushing the let's meditate during class, let's have body breaks, let's do this, let's talk about our feelings. But then the guidance counselors are not available, and that defeats the whole purpose, right? I want to see more guidance counselors available if that's what we're going for. You can't just half-ass it. You have to, if you're going to push the mental health benefits, then you have to actually have the resources to back it. And that's my biggest thing that I would add to schools, is adjust the amounts of guidance counselors you have. And then, if need be, one of the things that we talked about was if guidance counselors are also supposed to help with schooling and prepping for post-secondary and transcripts and stuff, we'll separate those roles. You have your mental health providers, and you have your school and extracurricular providers, right? That way they have more time to do what we want them to do, which is talk to us about our traumatic life that we need solving and fixing and coping with.
I think I can add on to that too. I mean, I definitely had that, not perspective, but understanding of what that felt like last year. Because my guidance counselor, she was not available whatsoever. And if you did go to talk to her, it's like the second you leave her room, she would call your parents. Like, no matter what you talked about, it's like she always called your parents. Or she'd always gossip to teachers about what some student came to talk to her about. And it's kind of like, it kind of makes me feel ashamed because, like, I don't know why my guidance counselor is telling random teachers how I'm feeling that day or, like, what kind of crisis I'm going through. And it's just really weird because, like, I can even talk to her just about, like, oh, like, I'm just having a bad day. And then she'd call my parents and make this whole big story how I'm feeling. And that's not the case at all. But this year, I think, my guidance counselor this year definitely saved the day because she's really nice and she really takes the time to get to know you. And her office is not busy, like, whatsoever, because we have, like, 2 people. Like, we have, like, one that's a career advisor that's, like, specifically for after high school, and then we have, like, an actual just guidance counselor that's, like, there for people to talk to. And I think that's really nice because she's also just really understanding and she kind of gets what you kind of go through. So it's really refreshing to have, like, a new person there who really understands. So
It's definitely, important to kind of find maybe that service provider that really gets and understands you and, shows you that sort of respect and confidentiality that you expect from that kind of system or service.
Yeah, I was not so fortunate to get a after, like, you had mentioned that your guidance counselor was separated from your school and a schooling advisor, which is great. I grew up in BC, and so, like, my high school had 1,200 students and we had 4 guidance counselors, right? It's just you didn't talk to your guidance counselor ever unless you were actively having a breakdown, at which point your teacher would call them and they would take you away to go talk to them. So pretty much the only way to get access to them was to have a breakdown. Yeah, it's just crazy world.
And definitely, with certain systems or within certain sort of institutions, maybe there isn't that funding for enough providers that there needs to be. You guys have both had your own experiences with substance use. Can you tell me a little bit about what you knew about substances before you started using them, and maybe what you wish you knew about them?
Yeah, so my school had this whole thing. When weed was legalized, they sat everybody down, they handed out pamphlets, every class was required to look at the negatives to weed and how it affected your brain and all the symptoms that it causes and why it's unhealthy. And it was very similar to how they push, don't smoke or, don't drink. Very aggressive. It was very similar to, like, older generation sex ed classes where it's like, we don't talk about it and we don't do it. Abstain, right? It's like, well, instead of talking about it and just saying don't do it, let's talk about the effects that it has, why someone might choose to do it. And so it was an unfortunate missed opportunity where it was very focused on, it's legalized now, we got to tell them not to do it. Because a couple years later they came out with a survey that the whole school was required to do, anonymously asking, how easy is it for you to get cigarettes? How easy is it for you to get all these different substances? And I kept going through the list. I'm like, I could have this one by the end of the day. I could have this one by the end of the week. I could have this one in 2 days, And it's like, it might not be legal for us, but that does not stop us. And so instead of pushing just don't do it, which I'd hope everybody would understand by now is a giant red button that says push me for teenagers, we should be discussing, how it affects your body and why you should minimize your use if you choose to do so, and do it in a safe place.
Yeah. I think my school is definitely more open to, like, understanding what, like, the risk is when you do take those substances. I mean, I've never really, like, my school has never really, like, done, like, those kinds of, like, surveys or, like, stuff like that. It's more so just, like, if you decide to do this in your spare time, just be careful and, like, be safe and just know, like, the risks and, like, the, like, cons that comes with it. And I mean, we do have, like, smoking doors outside my school that, like, students and teachers are allowed to go to. I don't know if that's, like, a good thing or not, but, like, it's, like, promoting safe, like, things, I guess. So, I don't know. But I think for me, what I wish I knew beforehand is just, like, sometimes I have, like, a good trip when I do things, but then most times I have a bad trip, and I wish I would have known, like, better side effects and stuff that come with those kinds of things, because beforehand I didn't really understand what it was like before I did it.
And I think understanding those different effects, and especially the effects and the risks that come with maybe mixing substances, is something that's really important to talk about. I think another thing that can be really important to talk about with our youth, and maybe this is something that is to be discussed with, a supportive family environment or in schools, is brainstorming sort of refusal skills. Both of you guys mentioned that part of your experience with substance use was this peer pressure that you experienced. Do you think that there is a way that maybe your teachers or your parents or your guidance counselors could kind of help you practice or think of ways to maybe counteract that pressure that you might experience?
I don't think so, and that might seem pessimistic, but I think it really goes back to the difference in generations, right? Like, you just don't understand it unless you're actively living the life we're living, and how much our life is based around the friends we make. Our parents say, go out, go make friends, don't stay in the house, you'll just get more depressed. Well, I go out and make friends. That's what I have to do to make friends, right? That's the type of person I have to be. And it's not just substances. There's tons of things, whether it's use the slang or share the same ideals. You need to share similarities with other teenagers, or you just don't get that. So trying to refuse a substance leaves you on the outs, as I said earlier. And so refusal techniques are not necessarily, at least in my opinion, a possibility, because you refuse and you become an outsider. I lived with it for quite a while before I finally gave in. People are like, oh, we're going out to the park to smoke. It's like, do you want to come? And I'm like, not really. I don't want to associate with that. I don't want to smoke weed. I don't want to be around people who smoke weed. And then you're left with no one. And it's like, well, now I'm just going to go home and sit alone and push my depression even further up to the surface. And then your parents get mad at you for sitting in the house and doing nothing. But then you go out and you finally say, sure, let's smoke some weed. And suddenly you're sneaking around, because if you tell your parents that you went out and had friends and you smoked weed, well, now you're in trouble for smoking weed. It's like, this is the life of a teenager, and it'll be different for every generation, but there are some overlapping similarities, which is that you have to be in the in crowd. I don't know from your experience what your high school experience was like, but I know, from stories from my mother what hers was like, and it was, not talking about weed, but it was very similar in the sense where if you're not with the in crowd, then you're a target. So it's difficult to try and help develop strategies to refuse said substances when they make up such a big part of teenage culture these days.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that a ton, because I think nowadays it's really hard to, like, find people who really, like, you genuinely, like, have a connection with. I think more so nowadays teenagers are just making friends with people who they think are, like, fitting in, and they don't want to feel left out. So I think they're changing themselves to fit in with other people instead of making friends that actually heal a part of themselves, but instead they're finding people who maybe do said substances, and they start doing those things so that they can feel like they're a part of something. I think that's definitely how I am. Like, most of my friends now mostly just do, like, drinking, smoking, whatever the case may be, almost every weekend, and I feel like I almost can't really keep up with it, because, like, that's genuinely not the person that I want to be. But I feel like if I don't, then there's no point in really being friends with them. So.
So maybe instead of this focus on how to combat peer pressure or practicing refusal skills, which is a conversation we've likely been having for many, many years now, probably decades, we could also, in addition to or instead, focus a little bit on building those coping skills that allow us to be comfortable and express who we are and how we want to be, the kind of person that we want to be. Because it definitely sounds like there is a little bit of that pressure is just coming from not fitting in with the in crowd, not being able to connect with other people, even when it's not necessarily the kind of person you want to be or the kind of things you want to be doing.
I agree. That would be the goal, I suppose. Although I do think it's more complex because of the fact that kind of is aiming to break down an entire piece of culture for an age group, which, I mean, is a challenge, but that's pretty much what needs to be done. It's just a tough challenge, right?
I don't know if this kind of relates to substance abuse or not, but I think for me, making friends is really difficult because I find myself matching other people's personalities instead of having my own. And I think that's been really tough for me for the past couple of years because I genuinely don't know who I am anymore because I've been kind of hiding my own person and just matching other people's personalities so that way I can fit in with them instead of them fitting in with me. So I think it's definitely really hard to go out and make friends because I'm not who I say I am because I'm kind of matching other people. Like, if I have, like, most of my friends, they could say, like, oh, you're, like, Noah's really quiet, but then my other friend could be like, no, like, Noah's really loud and obnoxious. And, like, it just really depends on who I'm hanging out with because I'm trying to not copy them, but I'm just trying to do what they do so that then they can like me. So.
I do think that maybe that's a piece that we've kind of overlooked in our conversation as well, is that, especially your high school, your teen years, part of that is exploring a little bit who you want to be and who you are. And some of that comes with interacting with many, many different groups of people.
And as someone with anxiety, it's really nerve-wracking when those two people meet and go, well, wait, why do we know two different people who's the same person? It's like, this is a lot to explain, and I would rather just continue to go and hide. And so then you're back at the start, making new friends, repeating the same process. It's very tiring. once again, another great reason to turn to weed is smoke the weed and then nobody's sober enough to recognize the difference.
Maybe not a great reason, definitely a reason that some people do, yes.
I feel like most reasons are not going to be good reasons, but that's why we're here to talk, right?
Absolutely. One last question for you guys, and that is just, how has your perspective on substance use, let's record that again. One last question for you guys. How has your perspective on substance use and its effects on mental health changed from your first exposure to it, and that exposure might be hearing about it or engaging with it, from then to now?
Beforehand, I was really against it. I was, don't do that, it's bad for you, and I played right into what the school told me to think. And after trying it, and how much better I felt, during the process, but also how good it felt to think back on trying it, and that relief, I had a new understanding of why someone might choose to use, which led me down to use for myself as well. And that was a relief, I would say, is the biggest thing. Is I would take it as kind of, at least in my opinion, it's a very stuck up position on it, and it becomes very, relax, just smoke a joint, we'll be good, and very chill and understanding and sympathetic to it afterwards.
For me, I think in the beginning, I wasn't against it. I was kind of just it's your life, live it how you want to. But I was definitely not that type of person to be I'm not gonna do that. I was personally against it, but I wasn't against it for other people. If other people did that, I'm just it's your life, do what you want. But then I think the first time I tried it, I'm why haven't I did this before? And I think now, it's been so long since the first time I ever tried it, that it just kind of got tiring. I think for me, going to my friend's house just to party and drink and smoke, it kind of just got tiring and not really fun anymore. It's kind of here we go again. And it kind of, I think for me, kind of worsened my mental health, because I feel I haven't been able to really find who I am and what I would and genuinely enjoy doing. I think it's mostly just fitting in with other people and fitting with my friends, and I don't know. I think that's all I really have to say.
Thank you guys both for kind of sharing your experiences with that. I think it was really cool to hear from both of you, as you've both had very different views and very different experiences with it. And that goes for most people, right? That everybody is going to have a different perspective and a different experience with mental health, with substance use, and just out in the world. Before we wrap up, is there any last comments you guys would like to make?
Thank you for coming out to talk with us.
My pleasure. I love being here.
Yeah, thank you, too.
Alrighty then. That kind of wraps up today's episode. Thank you guys all for listening, and we will catch you next time. Bye.
I'd like to thank Jolene. I'd like to thank Em. I'd like to thank Noah. Thank them for coming out, for sharing their thoughts and opinions. If you want to join the Huddle podcast, go to Hub Feedback at Huddleletslisten.ca and leave us a message. Leave us a message on our Instagram. Huddle, here for youth. Come on down. Thank you for listening. This has been the Let's Listen podcast. Have a great day, folks.